You see, the gods are false, but the spirits are real. And the Bible provides a clue. In the book of Deuteronomy, it says the people who worship gods actually worship something in Hebrew called the Shedim. It says in Psalm 106, they offered up their children to the Shedim. Shedim is not myth. Shedim is spirits, entities, beings. And the word translated into Greek, it went into the New Testament, the word is daimonia. We get the word demonic. The writings of Paul says they worship the gods, but they're really worshiping the demons. So what the Bible clearly says is behind the gods of the world are the Shedim or the demonia, the spirits of darkness. So when the pagan world was worshiping the gods, they were actually worshiping spirits. They were under possession. Pagan culture was a possessed culture. So what happened to all the gods of the ancient world, the gods of Rome and Greece? What happened? Messiah happened. That's what happened. The presence of God happened. The gospel happened. The Spirit of God happened. When the gospel went forth to the nations, to the pagan world, it drove out the gods. It drove out the spirits. It means the greatest mass exorcism in history was the driving out of the spirits by the power of Messiah. But spirits don't die. What happened to them? Messiah gives the answer. He says, when a spirit goes forth from a man, it wanders the earth looking for a place to dwell. When it doesn't find it, it says, I'm going to go back to my house, talking about the God. It goes back to the house, finds the house empty, clean, swept, goes back, finds 7 other spirits more evil, and they repossess the house, repossess the man, and Messiah said, the latter state is greater than the first, is worse than the first. But he wasn't just talking about a man. He says at the end of the parable, he says, so it shall be with this generation. Generations can be possessed, cultures can be possessed and can be delivered and can be repossessed. And the warning to America, the warning to the modern world, any nation, any culture, any civilization that has been delivered by God of the spirits, by the power of the gospel, by the word of Messiah, by the Spirit of God, if that civilization should ever turn away from God, from the word, from the gospel, from Messiah, the spirits are coming back into it. The same spirits and God, same thing, the gods are going to return to repossess it, to repaganize it. You want to understand what's been happening in America and much of the world for the last half century? It is a repossession. It is a paganization, to turn a Judeo-Christian civilization into a pagan one. In other words, and so you think, see, if we empty the house, the Lord said, the house is not going to remain empty. So we started emptying the house of God. Empty the house of God's Spirit, and the house did not remain empty. It's saying something else is coming back in. And they come back worse. You see, a pre-Christian civilization will produce a Sargon, a Nebuchadnezzar, or a Nero. But a post-Christian civilization will produce a Hitler and an Antichrist. When the Spirit of God is gone from the house, other spirits come in. See, we are witnessing that now. Messiah warned us never to do it. In the early 60s, we took God out of the schools. God, prayer, the word. And they thought it's a little thing. It wasn't a little thing. You take God from the children, you're taking God from the future. If you empty the schools of God, something else is going to come into the schools. You empty the children of God, something else is going to come into the children, and now is. Which gods have come back? In the return of the gods, I identify them. There are 3 primary spirits spoken of in the Bible. When Israel fell, they came in, they actually destroyed Israel. I call it the Dark Trinity. We don't have time to go into it tonight except to quickly say, the first one is called, in ancient Hebrew, the possessor in the Bible. The possessor. This is the one that comes into a nation that has known God, begins transforming it, driving God out of the culture, causing it to overturn the ways of God, paganizing it. It's come back here. It even lies behind things like wokeism, what's happening now. It causes a spiritual amnesia to come over the nation that not only it forgets God, it forgets it ever knew God. It's happening. The second is called, we don't have time to get into it either, but this is called the enchantress. This is one also mentioned in the Bible. Specializes in sexualizing the culture, seducing it from God, through the realm of sexuality, taking sexuality out of marriage. She sexualizes the culture. She is the ancient inventor of pornography. The word pornography is even linked to her name. She is the prostitute goddess. She destroys families. The third one is called the destroyer, and I will just say this about that. And that is, this is the one that causes parents to offer up their own children. So like clockwork, the third spirit enters America and the modern world. Messiah warned they'd come back worse. When Israel turned from God in ancient times, they offered up thousands of their children to the God, but now we've offered up over 60 million. But there was something strange about the enchantress. In her ancient inscription, she says, I am a woman, I am a man. In her hymns, it is written, you turn a man into a woman, and you turn a woman into a man. She's the one who confuses the lines of gender, confuses them, merges them, changes them, male and female, boy and girl, one into the other. She had an ancient priesthood who walked around her temples. They were men dressed up as women, and to whom parents would take their children to see them dance. She had some of her priests surgically transition from men to women. The Messiah said they come back worse. Back then she possessed a priesthood. Now she's seeking to possess an entire generation of children, to confuse them, to alter them. The returning spirits have touched every part of culture. The goddess who altered sexuality was also the goddess of parades. Her parades were, she caused men and women, men to dress up and parade through the city dressed as women with colors and all these parades in the garments of the other sex. Every year the goddess, especially, who altered sexuality, especially possessed a culture. 1 month especially. What month? The ancient writers identified in Latin as Iunium, or in modern English, the month of June. She was the goddess of pride, so June becomes Pride Month. One of the signs linked to the goddess was the sign of the rainbow. The mysteries even determine rulings of the Supreme Court, even the exact times when they have come out, even the striking down of marriage. Remember when the Supreme Court struck down marriage as we know it? And the president lit up the White House in a rainbow. It all happened on the ancient Babylonian day ordained, listen, to cast a spell to alter sexuality. That's when marriage was struck down. See, this is what happens when you remove God. They return. It's either one or the other. It was only the word of God, the Spirit of God, the power of God that was holding it back, protecting us. But you take that away, there is no protection. And it happens like this. When they first come in, it comes in the name of tolerance. Everybody do your own thing, be open. That's only to get in the door. Once they get in the door, once these spirits take possession, then the gods demand total surrender. Every knee shall bow. During this conference, the state of Michigan passed a law that if you call a biological male who says he's a female, it's a felony now, and you can be put in prison for 5 years. Laws are now on the table to actually charge parents with abuse if they don't endorse the mutilation of their children. The state can take away their children. This is real, and we're all in it. We went from a mantra of tolerance to cancel culture to a culture of totalitarianism, which will lead to persecution, except for the hand of God. I remember being a child in Hebrew school, and they told me of the story of Abraham and his father Terah. They said Terah had a shop of idols. One day, Abraham went in and smashed all the idols, except for the biggest one. And he put the rod that he smashed the idols into the hand of the biggest idol. When his father came home, he said, "What happened?" Abraham said, "The big idol got mad and smashed all the others." The father said, "That's ridiculous. Idols can't do anything." To which Abraham answered, "Then why do you make them?" The story is from the rabbinic writings. It's not the Bible, but the principle is biblical. The Jewish people were brought into the world to glorify God, to spread his knowledge throughout the earth, to stand for God, and to stand for God, we must stand against the gods of the age. They were born, they were created for that, to refuse to bow down, to expose the idol's feet of clay, and every sacred cow of their age. Moses stood against the gods of Egypt. Elijah stood against the gods of Canaan. Jeremiah stood against Molech. The 3 youths of Israel refused to bow down to the idol of Babylon. The Maccabees stood against the gods of the Greeks. Paul and the apostles, the first believers, stood against the gods of Rome. What about us?